Hi, and welcome to another edition of The Self-Aware Leader. This is our new podcast brought to you by Lead Skill. I'm Ron Oltmans, one of the founders of Lead Skill, and I'm joined today with Angela Oltmans, and we're going to be having a conversation about self-awareness and leadership. So the last couple of weeks, we were talking about emotions at work and how leaders create an emotional culture at work. So you can go back and catch those previous episodes on our YouTube channel. And today we're going to be really diving into self-awareness because, with a podcast called The Self-Aware Leader, we can't dance around the issue. That is really what it's about. And so we're going to look at just fundamental basics, but really crucial things about self-awareness and trying to grab hold of this idea. We're not going to say everything that can be said. There's no way possible, not in the time that we have today. But we're going to make the first effort, and we'll be revisiting this issue in subsequent episodes. So we just invite you to join us. If you've got questions, if you've got comments or insights, please feel free to use the comment or the chat function. And if you're watching this on replay, you can also make comments underneath the video, and we will watch those. We'll get back to you and maybe include questions or insights in future episodes. So we take your feedback to heart. We like to see how you're interacting with what we're saying. And we're also looking for the future that we'll be featuring other people in upcoming episodes of The Self-Aware Leader. So thanks for joining us today. And without belaboring this, I'm just going to turn it over to Angela. So Angela, welcome and thanks.
Okay, so today we're going to talk about the self-awareness topic for leaders. Yes. And so the first question I have is, let's see if I get my stuff right here. Let me just pop that
We
out.
are still learning streaming, so just your forgiveness as we are working out technical stuff and learning as we go. So
question 1, why is self-awareness such an issue for leaders? So when I had that question popped up, my first thing was, before we answer that question, I want to ask another question. Is it true, from your experience, that is an issue with leaders?
yeah, it really is, in my
Okay.
opinion.
All right.
And I guess the thing that I would point to is I think it's kind of funny. I'm now at a point where I do see some humor in this, but uh, psychologists have studied this. They call it the better than average effect. And the point is that in any size group, social setting, you're going to find that a lot of people think that they're better than average. On the order of maybe 80 or even 90% of the people in the room will think that they're better than average. And if you just stop and think about that a little bit, it's a statistical impossibility, because average, if we say it's 50%, then 50% of people are better than average and 50% are less or worse than average. And so it's just impossible that we can all, or a majority of us, could be better than average. But it's particularly among leaders. I've seen this, that when we ask the question, how many of you think that you have better than average self-awareness? I've stopped asking for hands to go up, because I realize that not everyone will put their hands up. But if you ask people this question, like in a written form, you'll get something close to the 90%, sort of response, that 90% of people think they're better than average. So it is an issue for leaders, mostly because our self-appraisal or our self-awareness isn't really it's not adhering to reality. So.
Okay, so that leaves me, there is a line that I think you said one time: none of us are self-aware as we think we are. The opposite is self-delusion. So it describes what you just said, that many of us think that we are more self-aware than we think we are. So can
Yeah.
you just kind of like, I mean, I think I'm self-aware.
Mm-hmm.
because I have to be aware of the situation and what's going on before I
Yeah.
make decisions on how to move forward for myself and for those that I'm working with. So, can you point to me some areas in which when I'm actually having an issue with being not self aware? Like a stop sign. I see a stop sign, I know I need to stop. So, what are the things that you could offer me, that right off the bat that I could think of, like, okay, I need to think about that question to help me see that I'm not as self aware as I think I am in this moment.
Yeah. So I think it comes down to probably a matter of levels. We all have a fundamental or a level of self awareness. I mean, to be human, part of that is, I'm thinking about again, what psychologists have done, the experiments about, when a baby comes into the world, they don't have any self-awareness or not much, self-awareness. And as you see a baby and an infant grow, you start to see the inklings of self-awareness grow as they become aware that, hey, the world is more than just them. And even like the first time that a baby sees their own reflection in a mirror, and it's even though we can't directly tap into what's going on inside of the baby, we can see some response, like, if the eyes are just kind of like just taking in that movement in a mirror, just like they take in all the movements around them. And then the day when they start fixating on that reflection, really studying it, and you see them like dialing in, and they start realizing that, hey, wait a minute, that's not just one of many shadows and shapes and things that I see every day around me, but it's like, it when I move, it moves. What's going on here? Is that me? And so there's a level of self-awareness that developmentally as human beings we grow into. And so you use the example of stop sign. When I come to a stop sign, I have a level of self-awareness that, hey, this is the time to stop. I'm going to stop, or I'm going to, slow down and maybe do a rolling stop, or, all the sort of internal dialogue. And so tuning into what we say to ourselves or what we're thinking is an example of self-awareness. It's one level of self-awareness. And whenever I say that leaders, there's an issue with self-awareness, it's because I would say for leaders, we really have to increase our level of self-awareness much higher, much greater than what we think we already have. Because the fact is, the responsibilities of leadership, it's important. Our decisions that we make have an impact on other people, and we have to learn to tune in to how we impact the lives of other people. And that's where self-awareness comes in.
So, before I want to go into a tool that you mentioned. You wrote a book about it, a practice guide. So, in the moment of when I am in a situation where I need to call up and see if I'm being self aware of
Mm.
what's going on, and I need a quick tool, quick tip, I'd like you to say more about that, because that is, and then before, I'm jumping in because, of course, we need you to define what a self awareness is. But when you said that all of us are saying that we're better than average in self aware, so, and you're saying, hold up, wait up, let's check in. And so I'm now asking, like, what is the tool? And the tool that I know that you are authority of, that you practice for years, is the mindfulness tool. Can you talk more about that? That in the moment I can call up and check in my levels of self awareness, as you say.
Yeah. So these things often are mentioned together. They go together naturally, mindfulness and self-awareness. And when you ask about the tool, I mean, practicing mindfulness is something that people have probably heard about, might even be practicing it for yourself. And what I've done I wrote a book about this. It's not a long book. It's a fairly short one. It's a guide to mindfulness meditation. And in it, I share a framework for how to go about increasing your mindfulness on a daily basis, on a regular basis, and just tuning into different channels of inputs of what's going on, mostly inside of you. But there is one in the channels where we tune into what's going on outside of us that is affecting us more directly. And I find that mindfulness is one of the better ways for us to start in a systematic way, tuning into a greater awareness of ourselves. So were you wanting me to give a little more detail about mindfulness, or was there a specific question that you had?
Yeah, a tool, something I can call up immediately in the moment where it's like, I want to check in on my level of mindfulness of the situation. So that when I make decisions, I want to be totally self-aware and mindful that I'm at full attention of my present moment in making the best decision I know how.
I
And
actually
there
have to give
might
you
be,
credit for this.
yeah.
And the reason I say that is this.
Mhm.
2020 pandemic, we were all confined, uh, inside for a period of time, some longer than others. But the point is, in that time, I created something called the emotions wheel, and you you really took it to heart. You really used that emotions wheel, I would say more than I did, but to really name the emotion of what you were feeling moment by moment and to manage that. And that was a great practice. And you asked me earlier this year, 2022, after 2 years of using this wheel, and you said, would you say that like the emotions wheel is like the go-to tool, for developing self-awareness? And I my first reaction when you asked that question was no, but I wasn't sure what was the answer that I was looking for. And then I became aware in the moment, like, so what is it? What is my go-to tool? And I recalled there was this model, this framework that I had developed many years ago, like 15 years ago or so, um, when I wrote a manuscript of this book. And I said, I need to revisit that and bring it out and make it more conscious, something that is I'm fully aware of, and also something I can share. And so that's where a guide to mindfulness meditation came from, was a book manuscript that I wrote like 15 years ago, and then I brought out this year. I'd say the heart of it is this practice, what I call the breath framework. It's a 6-step process for checking in to, as I was saying, different channels of things to become aware of. And what breath stands for, BREATH, it's an acronym, would be things like, first of all, your body, your physical body, what you're sensing, what you're aware of in your body, the muscle, tension, any pain, any pleasure, spots, like what's going on in the body right now. That's one of the first places to check. And then the second one is the room or the environment that you are currently in. Most of the time it's a room, but it doesn't have to be indoors. It could be, we could think of room metaphorically as what is the room, even if you're outdoors. What is the environment, the room that I'm currently influenced by? What are the sounds? What are the sights? What are the smells? What's going on around me in the external environment? The third is emotions. What am I aware of feeling, or what's going on emotionally for me right now? How can I name my feelings? Then there's attitude. What's my mindset right now? And T is for thoughts. What am I thinking at this moment? And the sixth and final one is what's going on in my heart, my spiritual center, or my, the core of who I am. I'm not going to elaborate on that right now, but I would just ask that question and leave it to say, it's good to ask the question to tune in what's going on in the heart, at the heart level, that's beyond some of these others. And that's really the essence of the mindfulness practice that I encourage people to do. You may not have an answer to every single question, all 6 of those checkpoints. In fact, it's common that maybe one or two of those is like you kind of draw a blank. I've done that many times, but it's a checklist to ask, and even the fact that we draw a blank is informative and tells us like, oh, I'm not really thinking anything right now, or I'm not tuned into my emotions, or I wasn't
Yes.
really paying attention to my body. So that's
Thanks for playing. And just gonna jump right into, when we talk about an interview and a podcast, usually we have set questions that we come ready, and this is the kind of the chronology that we're going to tackle these questions. And you're very gracious in being able to just kind of jump into this particular question that I have, which was toward the end. Just tell me about the tool. And so I was, while you were sharing that, I was able to pull it up from Amazon. There is a link there of your work, by people can click in. I also have right now on your website, I noticed the breathwork um, poster that you talked about, where you outlined the 6 steps: body, room, emotions, attitude, thoughts, and heart. All the
right.
6 steps that all of us can access immediately if we go and read. We use the book as a meditative guide, like you said. And you wrote this how long ago? When was that before you brought it to my
The first draft was 2006, but
right?
I only published it this year, 2022, that I brought it out and realized that I need to share that with people.
I realized it was very simple because there was not a lot of stories, but because you want people to do the work.
Yeah.
You can talk a lot about mindfulness, but you want to keep it simple and just do the work and
Yeah.
just remember. So when you talked about me during the pandemic, using tools to help me with my day-to-day living, coping, then management, and then how to successfully make every day productive, all these processes that I go through. And you mentioned the emotions wheel, which is another product that you created of Plutchik's work. The body, the emotions. I believe you started with basic 8, and then the ones that I rested on a lot was I made a sticker out of it, and I had 128, and that was my
Yeah.
go-to. And that was very useful for me. And
Yeah.
even though I was not in a leadership role, I was doing a lot of creative stuff online. I had to use this wheel to do my work because I was just, I don't know. I don't know what space I was in. I'm not in that space that much now, but I remember having to use this, if the camera, um, different times of the day when I just felt so much going on, but I have things that I needed to accomplish. And I would just take a moment and find out what I'm feeling and just break down and cry. Have my moment of breathing. If the weather is nice, I give myself a mental health walk, and then I'll go to the kitchen and cook or make myself a cup of hot tea. Come
Yeah.
back, and then there'll be some times in which I can't move because I feel stuck. I mean, all the essentials are there, all the to-dos are there, but I'm kind of stuck. I can't move. I feel like Sisyphus trying to push this rock up the hill, and I just don't want to do it anymore. I'm tired. So I had to look at my emotions and feeling, what am I feeling? And I realized that there was disappointment, there's pain, there's sadness, frustration, disgust. And once I named the emotions, I was able to be gentle with myself and move forward one thing at a time. Before I know it, when I look back, I'm like, wow, much was accomplished. So and that's why I'm here, showing up in this conversation with you to, help you discuss and share this more to a wider audience. What is self-awareness really, Ron? Can you define that for us in the simplest terms for your understanding?
Yeah. So
Do I have
I'm
to
going
sit?
to,
Yeah.
I'll just share like a
Mhm.
quick sort of definition
Right.
is for self-awareness. It's the ability to recognize, to tune into your emotions, your moods, your drives, your thoughts in the moment, and just be aware, be present to them. Not just, how it's affecting you, but also how your own emotions, thoughts, moods, desires, drives, how they're having an impact on other people as well. So that's self-awareness. It's like, it's what's going on inside of you and how all of that going on inside of you is projecting or impacting other people.
So we're talking thoughts, desires, and there was one more.
Emotions, drives.
How they affect us.
In practice, it's really your ability to recognize what's your emotional state right now. Like, what am I feeling? Do I have a name for it? Or am I operating at, good emotional efficiency, or are my emotions kind of getting in the way? Are they having a large impact on how I'm deciding things right now, how I'm functioning in life?
Yes, so I can see right now when you say that it's critical to become a self-aware leader. So when I'm in a pinch, or when I'm not in a pinch, whenever I'm involved in a um, place where I need to make a decision, or when I need to communicate an idea or something, a response,
Mm-hmm.
I need to be aware of the thoughts, desires, emotions, and drives within me. And when I take a check in of what's going on, then the quality of my answer and the way I answer might be better. Of course, in many professional contexts, most of us are adults, so we are adult. We have adult behaviors, but there are also situations where tempers fly, and I think that's what you're advocating. When tempers fly, can we come back to the breath, center ourselves, and still come up with thoughtful answers? And the best scenario I can come up with is like in a situation that's like in the courtroom, the judge is always calm. you know, at least
Yeah.
my
And
understanding.
the situation you described about where tempers fly, that's kind of a common one that we think about when people are angry or when they get triggered. And, we can see pretty obviously the way that emotions are impacting the dynamics, whether a person's thinking clearly or not, and whether or not other people start, ducking. It's like, are things going to start flying? Are they going to start throwing things or whatever? But I would ask us to expand it a little bit, because, I've also seen this situation where leaders, for example, when they're stymied or when they don't get their way, I've seen leaders sulk, or they can become, kind of defensive or even bitter. And so it's not just when tempers fly, but it's kind of the whole range of emotions. And that's one of the reasons the emotions wheel, I, advocate we get familiar and we use it as a tool, because it really helps us to see, okay, there is a whole range of emotions. And on the opposite side from anger is fear. And we've got to, we tend to, and I made a video about this, we tend to think of like happiness or joy as a pretty good, it's a positive emotion. And it's like, there's no problem of being joyful or happy until it's a problem. And what I mean by that is, you know, people can get carried away. They can become over optimistic. I've seen leaders make these very optimistic projections about where the business is going or what the market response is going to be to a new product, a new service, only to have their hopes dashed. And then they start looking for reasons and, trying to defend and explain. And so it's like, even our quote positive emotions can get the better of us and override our, other abilities to rein it in, or to say, okay, it's great that we're all having such happy, positive, optimistic thoughts, but what are we blind to right now? Or what potentially could be, working for our undoing here? We're here in Houston, Texas, and not everyone remembers this, but about 20 years ago in Houston, Texas, there was this company that imploded called Enron. It was in the energy industry, and a lot of people, employees, had piled a lot of their life savings into Enron because the stock was just going up, 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 only to realize that the leaders of the company were cooking the books and manipulating things behind the scenes. And so whoever got carried away with this unrealistic optimism, all these happy feelings, that everyone loved the ride up as the stock was going up. No one liked the ride down whenever it came crashing to earth. And so we need to remember that, emotions, it's not just one class of emotions that are problematic. We can, all sorts of feelings, positive, negative, can get the better of us and influence our decision making.
I like happy juice. I like positive vibes. So
Don't we all? We love a good vibe. We hate the vibe killer or the person who's a downer. I get it.
In any business or any endeavor that we take on, after the high, there is always the low, the unexpected or the expected. And it is in the trenches that we all the more have to have a moment and really come face to face with these unpleasant feelings or emotions. So, feelings and emotions, I'm aware that the unpleasant ones that I have, that I need to deal with. And it's necessary to deal with them versus run away from them, because it's part of life. This is part of the life cycle of a business, just like we found out news of your dad's business, who he had a very, very thriving one, sold off and did really well. And then now in the hands of another owner, decade later, it's not, it's sad to see how it's turning out. And so I was thinking about your dad. I was thinking about this is his life work. But like your mom says, there's a chapter of your work. You have to move on. Someone didn't take care of it like the way you wanted to. So these are the things that leaders all face. We go on with optimism. Investors come in. We have help. We have employees. But there will be a juncture where, man, I am alone in this. And when in those moments where I'm alone, there's a lot of those yucky feelings that come up that we avoid. Or can you just talk more about that, the place of emotion and feelings as a leader, and how to give attention to it, or when it's too much?
One of the ways that I ask leaders to tune into emotions and feelings is a very simple sort of way of thinking about this. To classify right now, what's my emotional state? And you've got three options, three choices. One is clear. Right now I'm clear. My emotions are, kind of like at the level that they should be, appropriate for the moment. And I'm feeling good about the current situation. Now, that doesn't mean good means that I'm, necessarily happy or positive. What may be appropriate for the situation right now is for us to be kind of like, okay, thoughtful and reflective. It's the season, or it's the time when we should be setting some plans and doing some reflection on where we've come. All right. But clear is one option. Another option is be cloudy. Right now, I'm aware that I'm having some feelings and they're kind of encroaching, or they're having some sway. They're swaying and having some influence on what I'm thinking about and what I'm looking at and what I'm not looking at. And then the third option, so clear, cloudy, red. I'm red right now. So, red doesn't just mean I'm red with anger, but it could be I'm just red. It's like red would be the sign of danger, about like, watch out, because emotion has reached a level where it is seriously swaying, and I'm not really thinking rationally. I'm being very emotional or being very irrational right now, because emotion is strong, so strong. So it's a helpful thing to ask yourself in any moment, where am I? And it's rare that we would say, I'm red, but that would be actually a breakthrough for self-awareness, that we are able to say in the moment, like, I'm red, and I'm just, it's really intense and I just can't think. Or, more often you're going to hear someone say, like, just leave me alone, or you're going to see some reaction. But wouldn't it be helpful if the people around you were trained in this and able to say, where are you right now? And are you red? And just to ask you that question so that you can actually look at it and be aware. Or are you cloudy or are you clear right now? And I think that kind of easy 3-part sorting of what I'm currently experiencing is one way that we can manage emotion. Now that gets into self-regulation, but I think it is the first step of it is self-awareness and just declaring, kind of like, if I had a needle, if I had a gauge, what would I say right now is that I'm aware of how much my emotions are influencing my thinking, my whole, behavior, my makeup.
When you mentioned about the red zone, I thought about the question that I just put in the what do you call this viewer
In our
chat.
comments, yeah.
Yeah, comments. I guess that's why it's one of the reasons why leaders are resistant to developing self-awareness, because just emotions like that are intense, and you don't want to go there because there's already a lot of things to take care of.
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
but not was it Josh? I can't remember. He says all emotions are valid, and that is a valid emotion. Naming them, naming I'm red. I'm the red zone. So when I'm
I
in a
think that's
red
something that
zone,
psychologists and most, therapists today I've heard them say that, all emotions are valid, because part of their whole work is to help people start, recognizing their emotions and naming them, and just not giving certain emotions a privileged place in their life, and other emotions are kind of like banished or exiled, or I don't even want to go there. I don't even want to think about, those feelings. But it's like, hey, all emotions are valid. It's okay, whatever you're feeling, to bring that out,
so what do you
especially in
do?
a safe space, like with a therapist or with a close friend who can help you to hear it and process it.
So what do you do when you have an emotion that you resist? What do you do? Do you do the breath work or the EQ wheel? What do you do? What are some of the things that you do?
I'm laughing because I'm thinking the first thing I do is I avoid it. I'm I I'm not a great example. I guess I would like to be able to say that I'm, this evolved person and I've already mastered it. But the truth is, when there's a emotion that's giving me, it's kind of got, it's eating my lunch, or I'm really in a red zone, I tend to avoid it, and I'm also defensive about it if it's pointed out to me. Now I'm trying to work on that and become more aware and also less reactive. And so in my better moments, I will, especially if I've got people around me helping me, reminding me of this, that's much easier, by the way. I'll take a moment to breathe. So the breath framework is a 6-step to take you through, 6 different channels, how you could access awareness. But it's also a reminder of the most fundamental practice, which is one of the best ways to capture mindfulness is just sit and breathe. And take deeper breaths, a little deeper than normal, a little slower than normal. I mean, it has a physiological benefit. It puts more oxygen into the system. It helps us pause. When you're breathing deeper, you're not as likely to be running off your mouth. And it actually does calm the nervous system immediately. It tends to have a calming effect. May not bring you from red to clear, but it may take you from intense red to a little less red. And then you might need another deep breath to move from, pale red to cloudy. So, it's a process. But breathing is a very powerful, approach. And then you asked a few others. I'll use the emotions wheel. I'll try to name the emotion when I'm on top of my game, but that's what I've got.
So every time, so when I do an interview, and one of the wonderful things that keeps me liking to do interviews is that I get a personal takeaway because that's the fun part.
And do you have a personal takeaway right now?
Yeah, just breathe. It's just as simple as that. But to be
It
reminded,
sounds so basic,
that's not so.
and here's the thing. As leaders, we often think that it's a shiny, object, or it's some great, fantastic thing, and we overlook the basics. But you know what? The power's in the basics. Return back to the breath. Wow, that's powerful.
Because when you mention that, I call up my own personal experience. I don't resist my emotions. I maybe because the way I'm wired, I just let it all out, let it rip, which is not very helpful. So, I'm glad I'm not a CEO or a leader of a huge company because that would be very toxic for, for a company. I don't like, I just let it all out. I need to learn how to manage my emotions, regulate. So I'm more like the waves that I saw last weekend when, have a moment at the beach. And I'm more like the waves. I let the emotions take me, and I take it out and then go out, take it and then I go out. And so the emotion I expressed, and I would say is not necessarily healthy, okay, especially in a workplace culture, because but yet the emotions are there. So I very much would like to be what you pointed out to me, because the way how the stars and the moon are aligned, Jupiter you saw, and you were able to point out to me the four moons surrounding Jupiter that night. And I really like to be just like that planet, calm and quiet. So when you said just breathe, immediately I think about that planet, Jupiter, there still, you know, just looking, it just like it make you think like things are put things into perspective.
So when I saw it in binoculars, it looks kind of like a bright star, and through binoculars, I could see the little faint dots that are the four visible moons around Jupiter. That was kind of cool. But when we get closer, or like when you see it through a powerful telescope, you get a visual and you realize that, hey, wait a minute, Jupiter's not so quiet and peaceful. It's a gas giant. It's storming. It has a huge red spot on it, bigger than the size of Earth. It's like a permanent storm that is just like swirling, and it's like it's a maelstrom of activity. So it looks peaceful from a distance, which, by the way, is a pretty good metaphor. Some leaders look like they got it all together from a distance, and they look
Mm.
bright and shiny. But when you get close up, you see the storms, and you realize, you know what? In their orbit, it's kind of like, Jupiter knocks its moons around, and it causes huge, what they call tidal forces on the moons that orbit it. And much like leaders have a tremendous influence on the people in their immediate orbit, and people are very fine-tuned to the kind of the emotional ups and downs of their leaders. So
Wow.
it's a good metaphor. Thanks for letting me unpack that.
Thank you. Thank you for sharing. And this is all I've got as far as questions. Is there anything else that you would like to touch on in today's topic of self-awareness for leaders that you'd like to leave leaders to be thinking of, or a reminder that you have for
So yeah,
listening in?
I'd like to mention this, that self-awareness for leaders is something that we can absolutely grow in. And my earlier comments, toward the beginning about, better than average, and how as leaders we tend to kind of resist, and we're not as self-aware as we'd like to think we are. They're all true. I'm just going to stand by that. But it's not like self-awareness is this huge, like boulder that, we just can't drag it up the hill. We're going to be doomed to frustration like Sisyphus in the Greek myth, where he's trying to pull that boulder uphill and always, he ends up pulling him back down. It's just an exercise in frustration. Self-awareness is something we can grow in. And if there's hope for me, there's hope for anyone, because I made a video about this. I've got it on my YouTube channel. You can go find it, about self-awareness in leadership. And I compared myself to a rock, and said, I've got, I've been told before, I have the self-awareness of a rock. And, I'm growing. I'd like to think that today I have a little more self-awareness than a rock. And the fact is, there's times when I'm still very rock-like, very hard, very unreachable, very stubborn. And I'm learning to soften up. I'm still learning to kind of be a little more self-aware, not just to what's going on inside of me, but here's the key thing. And I mentioned this earlier. Another part of self-awareness is learning to tune into our impact or our effect on others around us. And I think that's one part of self-awareness that it's really been a blind spot for me, is kind of like dismissing my impact on others, or not really owning it, that I have an effect on the people around me, for good or for ill. And there's a responsibility in that as a leader to start tuning into it and be more aware.
Yeah.
And more conscious.
Yeah.
And then to choose. So what am I going to do with that? And so to turn awareness into influence, positive influence. How do I set the tone? How do I set a pace? How do I create a culture, like we talked about last week, as a leader for those around me?
I think that was a quote that you said that I was responsible for helping to put it out there. And I remember you said something about followers want to know that you get them. And that's what empathy is. And when you...
I think the quote was something like, followers want to know that you get it. But even more important, they want to know that you get them.
Exactly. So thanks for being in this field of helping leaders become more self-aware and increasing their emotional intelligence, because one of the things that I see, one of the essential byproduct is that you become more empathetic. And definitely, having known you for over 3 decades, I certainly would say that that has been a wonderful gift that you give.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I would, before we go, I'd also point out, we've mentioned the tools like the emotions wheel, the breath framework, which is part of the practice of mindfulness. I would also point to, and I mentioned this in the video that I referred to on self-awareness. It's a good video. I recommend you go back and catch that. Some other tools, like you can do formal assessments. At LeadSkill, we offer things like an EQ assessment for leaders. We have Trimetrics EQ, where you get a read on what is my current emotional intelligence, as well as an understanding of my behavior style and my driving forces. We have another tool called Acumen that I've been really diving into lately, and some of my videos have been about Acumen and the whole field of axiology. So these are some of the tools by which leaders can really go deeper and do the deeper excavation of self-awareness. And I'm not saying that, for example, mindfulness is just kind of, getting surface level stuff or superficial. Mindfulness can go very deep too. I find that a lot of leaders also want to explore this area with their intellect, with, their, understanding, with the rational side too. And there are some tools that help us do that. And so some of these formal assessments are one way to do that. If you want to include the people around you, you can do 360 feedback And that's a great way to take not just your self-understanding, but to get that other aspect of how other people see me. I think this is one of the great insights that I've really benefited from recently, is that self-awareness is not just my understanding of myself, but it's also how other people see me. Learning to tune into those impressions, the ways that other people um, think of me and see me and how they relate to me. That is another part of self-awareness. Now
That's a,
we may think that we don't have access to that, but we do. And there are, again, there's tools, there's practices, and it's to our great benefit if we will take time to just ask the questions and tune into that.
okay. All right.
Things for us to explore in future episodes. So I just want to thank you for watching this. And as we said at the beginning, I want to encourage you to interact with us, join the conversation, drop your comments or your questions in the field for comments, and let us know what you think and what you're interested in knowing more about and exploring. And if you want to reach out directly and get in touch with us, you can go to leadskill.com, and we have a way for you to contact us, or here on YouTube, there's also a way to just get in touch with us, and we monitor these things, and just reach out, let us know, hey, I would welcome an individual conversation. We can set up a Zoom conversation if that would be something you want to explore. How can I grow my self-awareness? Or what kind of work do you do for companies or organizations? Let's talk about that. If you are someone who hires speakers and you want me to come speak at an event, we can talk about that as well. So we're here ready to serve. Just reach out and let us know.
Bye-bye. That's it.
Bye, everyone.